Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Keep Up with Pryme. Today, the Professional Services edition. I'm Laura from the marketing team, and today with me is Aske Holz, Product Manager at Pryme Global. Should you have any questions along the way, please use the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll have a look at those at the end of the session. Thank you very much, and over to you, Aske.
Thank you, Laura. So let's get right into it. It will be a relatively short session today. So we will look at a bit of new features for the November release that are relevant to the ProServe area. So first up, we are, as usual, structuring this by the work area, so to speak. So for the setup area, we have what is probably one of the most exciting new things, which is expense price templates. Going into the planning area, it's mostly a new feature for grouping in the Kanban board if you're using Pryme Project Work. If you haven't tried that one out, this is also an opportunity to maybe get acquainted with that. Then we have resource lines on purchases in the work area and a new time approval reminder for time. And in the invoicing area, we have actually one entry which shouldn't be there. And then we have requiring comments on AP automation. I will be quite quick today. So let's get right into it. So first up, the expense price templates. And I might want to make this a little bit bigger for you. So when you have a project, you might sometimes want to have special rules for how expenses are going to be recharged to the customer. It could be that certain kinds of expenses are not recharged. They're recharged at a different rate, and that we can set up in a project. So we have the expense prices that we can define. Now, the new feature is that you can save those expense prices as a template, and you can get a template. So you can reuse the same setup. So if you have multiple projects where you have a similar setup for expense prices, you can now say get template. And yes, I would like to use my standard template. Of course, we could have a look at what that includes. In my case, it is a template that says that hotel costs are to be recharged at a 10% margin up. Restaurant and food should be charged at cost, and domestic travel, in my case, has a extra surcharge of 50 on top of whatever the cost is. So different rules, but this is just one template. You can create as many templates, and of course they could be complex with special rules for different tasks and units of measure and currencies, etc. But if you're using a lot of setup of expenses, these expense price templates should make your life a lot easier. And of course, after a template, you can always adjust it locally on each project. Next up, we have the planning phase, where we have a new column grouping in Kanban. And I realized I didn't show the project work for ProServe last time. So I'll actually take a bit of time to show that. It was shown in some of the webinars for the other areas, but I think it could be interesting to those in the professional services area as well. So let's take a few minutes to look at what we can do with that. So the idea behind project work is that you can create work items and track that across different projects. And what I can do is I can go in on a project and I can define work to be done. I already might have a budget, I might have something else, but I now also have work items shown here. And a work item is something where we consider that a piece of work that has to be done by a person or maybe multiple persons, and we want to track the actual progress of that work. It's not just a task where, in this case, we have specification work. We want to be more detailed in how we track that. Of course, we could create additional tasks to track that, but sometimes it's actually nice to have this kind of a sub-level below the task where we can track individual pieces of work. And that could be more of admin work. It could also be actual work to be performed. So I can create a new work item for this project. Let's create one here. And I would say this is a specification, and I need to do a bit of setup here because I've never used this before. So I will get out of here and I will open up my Pryme Project Work setup, and I will define a number series for this. I should have done this ahead of time, but let's do it right now and say we want to have some numbers for these work items. Should start with this number, and this will be my default number series in here. So now I can create some new work items. So I'm creating a new work item, and by default, it gets the title of the task we're on, but this could be, maybe it's a detailed spec. And I can assign it to someone. I'll wait a little bit doing that, but we could set maybe a start date saying this is something that should be started next week. Maybe it's something that should be done by the middle of the week later. I don't have to put the start dates and due dates on, but I can. I can write a long description of the work to be performed, and this can be more free form. Write a spec to blah, 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 something. And with that, I can then also create a checklist of things to be done. So I can say, well, what is the first step to be done? That is to do a pre-estimate. And then we want to find requirements. And then we want to write details. And then we want to maybe add tests, if this was a technical specification. So these are my steps. And so I can also track what of this has been completed. I'll hide this note section. So I can track that over time as work is being performed. And I can even subdivide this into being something where we say, well, the testing is actually something that is a big task on its own. So maybe this should be its own work item. So I can break this out, say, create this as a new work item, and then I have a new work item related to the first, where this might be assigned to someone else to do, and maybe there is also a due date on that. Maybe that needs to be done by the 1st of December and so forth. So you can create a whole tree of pieces of work to be done within a task. Let me assign this one to myself. And now this is on my list of things to do. Now, if I want to reuse this later on, I can save this again as a template. So I will save this as a template and call this spec template. Now I have this for future use, and the next time I need to create a similar task, I can use this template. I could also copy from another work item. And so this is now work to be done. I can see that 2 work items on this project to be done. They are not started and they're definitely not completed. So it's a different way of tracking work. And it can be really nice as something where you're tracking it in more detail, more than just seeing that time is being spent on it being done. This now shows up here for me as a person where I can see my work items. I can see that I have something that I should start soon. There's one item to start soon. There is one item that is due soon. Okay. And we can then, of course, have a look at it. That gives the same view again, but now it's for me. I could also view all the work we have across in a Kanban board. So I can look at all the work we have here and I can work it through different stages of a process. So when I'm ready to start working on this, I could say move it into in progress. And so now I can track that this is in progress. And of course, if you have a lot of work items across different projects assigned to different people, this makes it a lot easier to do. So let's create a new specification now for another project and say this is also a specification, but I will use my template to create that. And let's make sure this is due sooner. So maybe this is already due tomorrow. I'm a bit late on that. I will assign this to Daniel, for instance. And we see we get the same checklist again, and we can follow that progress. So now we have something for Daniel, something for Prakash. And you can group this data in different ways with swim lanes. You can do who is it assigned by? These are the things for Daniel. These are the things for Prakash. You could do it by project. This is the ERP development project. This is the ERP implementation project. Or it could be by customer. In this case, they're both for the same customer. And what we added in the November release is a new set of column rules where you can do columns by date as well. So we can see what is due tomorrow, what is due next week, what is due later. So we have this kind of timeline, which can be really useful when working with a customer and seeing how are we tracking, are we going to do soon, what is already done, etc. Working down that backlog of things. And we can also track what is the progress of the completion. Here we see that 0 of the 4 items on the checklist are completed. If I open this up and say now, well, we've done the pre-estimate and we've done the requirements, this will now show 2 out of 4. So a really nice way of tracking work, something that is often done in outside systems like Asana, Monday.com, or Microsoft Planner, or To-Dos, something else. But here it's inside the system. It's the same place everybody's working. And it can also be used for time tracking. So when you're entering time, whether directly on a timesheet or with a tracker, the work item then becomes a field in here. So I don't have to figure out what was the project and task number I was working on. I can simply open my list of work items that I'm working on and select from there, and it will pre-fill the project and task description. So it becomes a lot easier to track time as well. So there's a bit of synergy effect in there. Make it easy for people to find the work by creating work items, makes it easier for them to also track that time accurately. That was enough about Pryme Project Work. If you haven't tried it out already, I would suggest you do so. There is a QR code for Pryme Project Work here on the right-hand side, so you can have a look at that. You can also find more information on our homepage as well for this. Back to what's new. In the work area, we have a new capability on purchases that we can create lines of the type purchase. And it's a change that doesn't directly change what you can do. It's not a new capability per se, but it allows you to work in a way that some find more intuitive. If I create a new purchase invoice here, and I want to create a line, in the past, if you created a line for a project and a task, you were not able to, and it was for buying resource time, you could not select the type resource. Now that is possible. So I can now create a line for, let's say, an external, and I can set that I want this to go to a certain project and a certain task directly. And this makes it a bit more clear what this is. In the past, you had to select the type of GL account and then use a field further out here for selecting the resource number. it doesn't make any difference which one you select. You can go either way. You can still go with GL account, fill in the resource number out here, or you can use the type of resource. Postings, the same, shouldn't make any difference. But it just makes it a little bit more clear what you're working with. One thing to be aware of is when using the resource type, it still applies the exact same logic as before. And that also means that the posting groups and the accounts it will be using is from the progressive setup of how to set up accounts, because there could be different setups on different projects. So it's not the base setup of Business Central where it's a product posting group on the resource that decides the posting. It's actually the advanced projects posting setup that looks at the rules and says, for this particular project, we need to post to a different account. The old way is not going away anytime soon, but it's a new capability. Then we have a new feature on Pryme Time, which is a time approval reminder. We've had a number of reminders in the past that we could send out, and now we've just gotten an approval reminder. So it's very similar to the reminder emails that we already sent out to different people who have forgotten to submit their timesheets. In this case, it is a reminder to the managers who are going to approve time to let them know that they have some time they haven't yet approved. And it's very easy to schedule. You can open up the Pryme Time setup, and in the Pryme Time setup, there are options to schedule reminders as before for unsubmitted timesheets to resources, the escalation unsubmitted timesheets to managers to let them know that some of their staff haven't submitted their timesheets, but now we also have the unapproved timesheet to managers, which is a reminder to say you have some timesheets that you have forgotten to approve. And so we can schedule a send out for this. There is already a function in Business Central that will send notifications for approval. The difference is that that function sends out that notification as soon as an entry is created. So if you have a two-step process where time is first approved by a project manager and then a line manager, the line manager will get notifications every time a project manager approves a new entry. And that could be a lot of emails, and maybe to the level where, especially if lines are approved one by one, that it becomes too much. With this feature, we send out one email, which is a digest email with all the timesheets across all resources in one single email. And it's a bit easier to have that as a list to go through and see, okay, this is what I need to do, and not that many emails. So trying to cut down on communications, only send the most important part to people. The last thing is a new feature in Pryme AP Automation, which is the possibility to require comments on rejections. I will not show the whole workflow for that one, but it is a new setup in the AP Automation, Pryme AP Automation setup, where you now can put in that you want to force or require a comment on anything that is rejected. So you cannot just reject a line or a purchase invoice and say, no, it's rejected. You have to specify why you reject it. So the people looking at it will actually have an idea of why was this rejected. But it's an opt-in. You will have to turn it on for it to be. And if you do that, then everybody will have to add a comment in order to reject a purchase invoice or a line on a purchase invoice. I'll spend a few minutes on our future roadmap. This is not a complete roadmap. The roadmap is changing as we go, but this is some of the items we have on the roadmap for the future for the ProServe area. So for February, we intend to create more permission sets. We will do some improvements to the time calendar in Pryme Time. For project work, where we looked at the Kanban earlier, there will be a calendar view instead, where you can look at it in a more traditional timeline view. And for the subcontracting, which we looked at last time, there will now be proper approval workflows, and there will be an option to email out subcontractor statements automatically. Going forward to May, one of the biggest features that we've been working in a long time is time tracking outside of BC. I cannot say so much about how this will work in practice, but in general, it's an idea to have a window outside of BC that you can keep open and where you can easily track your time without having to open up BC in order to do time tracking. So trying to make it easier to continuously track your time and keep track of the status of time tracking or time entry. Hopefully over time we will be able to also take that technology and put it into other places or applications where time tracking could be relevant. So that could be time tracking inside Microsoft Teams or time tracking inside of Outlook. Time will tell. Then we're looking at project risk management. This will be a new offering, and we are targeting a May release on that. And for August, we are looking at a new process for working with time descriptions. This is mostly for when you have a lot of entries where the description is critical to the invoicing process, where it's you want to review the descriptions of work and be able to do that in bulk. So you might have an invoice with 100 lines and trying to make that easy with some pages that are focused on editing descriptions, doing search and replace changes, doing policy checks where a policy document might describe how descriptions should be done, and also using that for suggestions for making changes to those, again, as an AI feature. But this is the longer roadmap. I hope this is useful. This is all I had today. Again, I will suggest that if you haven't done so already, have a look at our project subcontracting and project work apps. And that was all for me today.